Okay, let's talk about barriers of resistance and solutions. And I am open for discussion about this. This is sort of our last part of our talk, and this really stemmed from the Canine Athlete Pack post that I sent in yesterday, asking for people going, what is your biggest barriers of resistance to why you don't complete a warm up? So a big one that I saw was the volunteer schedule. Okay, people were basically saying that, the volunteer schedule for small trials, they had to volunteer in all the runs that they weren't running in. And it just became really hard to sort of find time to warm up your dog and cool down your dog with the responsibilities of having to volunteer. So I just really want you to think about this, is that your dog always comes first. Because last time I checked, and this is brutally honest, but last time I checked, the club that I'm volunteering for isn't going to help pay for my dog's rehab. I want you to think about that. Okay. Yes, I'm all for supporting the clubs. I'm all for volunteering. I help at every trial I go to, but I will never sacrifice my dog's health and potentially causing an injury because I spent so much time volunteering that I didn't have time to properly warm up and cool down my dog. To me, that just doesn't make sense. Okay. And I've been to a lot of trials, whether it's international trials, whether it's local trials. I pick my volunteer schedule sort of based on how my dogs are running and what I'm doing. And I've been honest with some, when I've run 4 dogs before, which is insane, I tell them like, hey, I might only be able to do this one event or the starter jumpers or one class that, I'm not part of. Then I will help out in that. But I'm very clear that, hey, my dogs are always coming first. And that's just how it's going to go. Guess what? The trial's still going to go on. If they call you and you're not around, it's still going to go on. Okay. But I do want to make sure you're putting yourself first. Okay. And not, I get that there's volunteer responsibilities. I fully acknowledge that. Okay. I want you to select volunteer positions that are going to work with your trial schedule, right? I like to do a lot of course building. I love course building. Why? Because then I can sort of walk the course and build the course. And sometimes, I might be up first in the running order, right? Which means I want to make sure I help build the course. So I've already sort of walked it. And then I don't have to spend 8 minutes or 7 minutes, however, many minutes they give you. Then I don't have to spend the full 7 or 8 minutes walking the course. I might only walk it for 4 minutes. And then I might go warm up my dog if I'm first on the line. Okay. The other thing that, I just missed it there. The other thing that I want to talk about is, let's think about if you're doing like a novice jumpers. You don't need 7 or 8 minutes to do it. Now, some people might, right? So I'm not saying it's not possible, but do you really need 7 or 8 minutes to sort of do some of these novice jumpers or some of these, easier courses? Probably not. So does it mean you might have to sacrifice your walkthrough a little bit? Yeah, but if it means that my dog has a good warm up, then fantastic. Okay. And remember, any warm up is better than no warm up, right? I'd like you to try and get that 5 or 10 minutes in when you're at a trial, but that doesn't always happen. Okay. Small local trials and running multiple dogs, right? You are going to have to get a little bit creative. So when I just keep hearing barrier after barrier after barrier, you're not thinking outside the box. You're fixed with your mindset. I need you to adopt that growth mindset. Okay, how can, I be creative? When I run multiple dogs, so in CKC trials, that I don't do often, but sometimes I do, I will have multiple dogs in 12-inch and multiple dogs in 16-inch. And generally it's small trials. So I'm literally back to back to back to back with like 4 dogs. Okay. I have mastered warming up 4 dogs at a time. Mastered it, right? It's something that I do. People think I'm a little bit crazy, but you know what? I spend 5 minutes and I warm all 4 up together, right? I will do figure eights. I'll have 2 dogs sit and I'll do figure eights, right? I'll do tandem figure eights with 2 dogs. And then maybe I switch them out and have them sit and do it backwards, right? I practice this. So this is something that I practice in my backyard. So it's not like I'm doing it for the first time at the trial. These are things that I practice. So sometimes it's about getting creative and warming up and cooling down the dogs together. Sort of like that picture you saw in the cool down. I'd run all these dogs back to back to back. I didn't have time to cool them down right after their run, but it was within 5 to 10 minutes, right? So again, you've got to do your best, but then try and get creative with, walking all the dogs out together. Use the allowed time, right? So I think of like UKI, and I know everybody's a little bit different, but you have 6 minutes between dogs, right? It's a written rule in UKI. Use it. So many people feel bad. They're like, oh yeah, but now we're holding it up, and you get people that talk, oh, we're holding up the trial because somebody's got to catch their breath. No, use it. Absolutely use it, right? Because we have that in place. And if you're the first dog up, right, there's generally minimum 5 minutes. I don't see very often anymore where it's like it starts literally once that buzzer goes for the walkthrough that you have to then run your dog right away. I don't see that very often. And you know what? I've shown up before where there might have been trials. This was more, a couple of years ago. And first dog on the line, they're like, nope, you got to run right away. I'm like, oh crap, my shoelace broke. Hate when that happens. And then I have to disappear to get my shoelace fixed. And then I come back 3 minutes later, right? Again, you got to get creative sometimes, but I am never, ever going to sacrifice my dogs for this. You just got to be creative, cut your course walking time. Trish says I warm up dogs while the course is being built. Mid-sized dogs, usually not first or last, so we can keep them warm after walk through before run. Yeah, remember you have that 15 to 20 minutes protective benefit, right? So you can even, before you do your walkthrough, get your dog out as they're course building. Maybe that's the time that you go walk your dog and warm them up, right? Then you put them away, you walk the course, and then you go grab your dog, right? Another barrier that came up was lack of knowledge. I don't know what to do. Here's the thing. You guys are on this call. You have a better idea, hopefully, about warm up and cool down. You all own my book, right? There is no reason why we can't come up with solutions to have a good warm up and cool down. Okay. So that quote of knowledge, knowledge is power. I shouldn't have said is it. It should be knowledge is power. Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. You can have all the knowledge in the world and do absolutely nothing with it, right? Which means you're no further ahead than Joe. Okay, so this is something where applied knowledge is power. So now you have this knowledge. Hopefully you have even more strategies after this call tonight to implement. And I want you to go look at that book, download the book, read the book. It's only 42 pages. It will take you like 20 minutes, not even. And there's lots of pictures in it, right? So the excuse of I don't know what to do, I just don't fully buy it because, well, for some people who don't have access, what you don't know, right? And this is why I try to educate and I try and get out there and talk about these things to as many people as possible so that I can help people. Because there are people that don't know what to do or don't know the importance of it, right? So that I get, right? But for the people that understand this, right, and have these resources, I want to make sure that you're using them. Handler cutting corners. So yes, oftentimes we don't change till something bad happens. Don't let that be you. And this is the case with so many things in life. Thinking of somebody who has a really poor diet, and they've been told by their doctor, you should probably cut your cholesterol and you should watch how much fat intake you have, and they just keep going and going and going. The next thing they have a heart attack. What do they do after the heart attack? Every single time, they generally start eating healthy, right? But they had to wait till something bad happened. Okay. A lot of people with canine fitness, right? They sort of dabble, they do it now and then, but they don't really see the value of it until something shitty happens and your dog gets injured. And it's expensive. Rehab is not cheap. Diagnostic tests are not cheap, right? And again, you can do everything right. In the case of Shades, I'd like to think I've done everything right. He's on good food, he's on good supplements, fitness work, warm up and cool down. Sometimes things happen. There are risks in the sport that we play, and that's just reality, right? But I want you to really be proactive, right? And not reactive. So I do see this where we just cut corners. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your social time, right? I want you to think about what are your priorities. Yeah, I love getting together. Like part of trials is socializing with friends, right? Yeah, I like the community that I'm around, right? But at the same time, I'll catch up about what you're doing this weekend or like next week or what you did last week when I've warmed up my dogs, right? I want to make sure that the dogs always come first. So you just really have to check yourself and go, what are your priorities? Okay. And I know sometimes that we get lost in conversations. Okay, this happens to all of us. I like to talk. I'm sure that comes as a very big surprise to all of you. So I literally set timers, right? The marker dog on some of these gait app sheets will now like send you a text message and ring a bell when your marker dog is up, right? So if you don't have that technology, because not all trials obviously have that, then set a timer, right? Have it go off so that if you do get sort of lost in chatting with people that, you have something that's going to remind you. Okay, trial schedule. Again, if you're early in the walkthrough, right, just make sure that you're, taking that time, whether you're doing warming up while they're course building, or maybe you're course building and sort of walking it a little bit as you're course building, which we can all do, and then go and warm up your dog, right? And again, they have that sort of time, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes before first dog's on the line, or time between dogs. So if you're worried about your other dogs and saying, well, now I got to run another dog, take the time that you need, okay? Some people don't see the value in it. Okay. Our dogs look ready to go. Look at, Keeper when I was warming her up. That was after a dead sleep. Okay. So we go outside, we start warming up. That dog was ready to go. That dog looked like she was ready to go run agility. Right. So it's very deceiving sometimes because like, well, our dogs are ready to go. They're excited. Like their bodies must be ready. Right. So I want you to think, would you go and run 5 kilometers without warming up? Right. You wouldn't. It's not mentioned or taught in class. This is where you guys are leading by example, right? You have access to all this knowledge, this presentation, access to me to ask questions. You have access to my book, right? If it's not taught in class, I want you to lead by example. Pioneer this, right? People will start to come around and start to see what you're doing, and then they will start to adopt it as well. Sometimes they get, just class schedule makes it tricky to warm up the dog. right? So like you go to class and you walk the course and then you just like go, boom. Well, maybe you can show up 5 or 10 minutes before class, right? If there's not a lot of room, then maybe you are doing your walk from the car to the training, right? I'm somebody in seminars that generally, with some of the international seminar presenters, I remember Daniel Schroeder when I was working with him, and he was like, oh my gosh, he was like super, super quick, where you walk the course and it was boom, first dog goes, right? Dog goes for 4 minutes, next dog goes. Like it was one of the quickest seminars, not in terms of like we all got our allotted working time, but it was just very fast and very efficient. And I didn't go first. I wouldn't, right? I'm like, I'm not going first. I can't do that, right? I'm too worried about something happening, especially now with shades. Obviously, I didn't do anything wrong with shades, but hey, stuff still happens. But now I'm extra cautious of these things. Like I just would not put myself in that situation now. So you just got to stand your ground and say, hey, this is how it's going to go, or show up a little bit earlier as well. Poor planning, again, planning goes a long way, right? So sticking to that routine, practice it, right? If you're like, oh, I'm not really sure what to do, well, just use it as, training time at home, right? To say, okay, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out my warm-up routine, right? So make sure you have that plan, because again, if you have something consistent that you're doing, you're going to be more likely to follow through with it, versus if you get to an agility trial and you're like, oh, okay, today I'm going to warm up my dog. What should I do? And then you're like, left, right, back up, and the dog's like not doing it. You're like, oh no, this is not working well, and you get frazzled, right? So have that routine of exercises that your dog knows well, because you don't want to be training stuff in your warm-up routine, because that's just going to lead to frustrations, and we just don't need that. Lack of space. You don't really need a lot of space. If you saw where I worked in the backyard, it was a pretty small space. You don't need a lot of room. And let's say you have an even smaller space, maybe only back up 2 steps and do some left and some right turns versus backing up 7 or 8 steps. Okay. There's generally somewhere to exercise your dog at any of these trials, right? Because obviously there has to be somewhere to X the dogs, right? So just again, you got to get a little bit creative. Use the distance from the car to the ring where you might do that. Lack of time. You don't need a lot of time. Just remember, anything is better than nothing. Okay, so even if you only have 2 minutes, 2 minutes is better than 0 minutes. Okay, obviously I'd like you to strive for that 5 minutes, but if you're really short on time and hey, it's happened, doing something is better than nothing. Okay, you should never, ever, ever, if you're competing in sports, it is not fair to ask your dogs to come out of a cold, a car and out of a crate with cold muscles and run the dogs. Okay, because at the end of the day, our dogs are going to do it because they love us and they have adrenaline and they're an animal. They are going to do it. Okay, so it's not fair to say, oh, well, my dog's ready, so away we go. If you're involved in a sport, you owe it to your dog to make sure you're doing some aspect of a warm up and cool down. Okay, and again, sacrifice social time if you need to, because there's always more time. Okay, any questions on that?